Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations, and this video I'm going to be diving into the new moon in Sagittarius. I'm going to be exploring the changes that are going to be taking place for us and hopefully giving us something to reflect on as we navigate this next lunar cycle. So let's just jump straight into it. So we've got Mercury turning retrograde 2.5 hours roughly after this new moon. We've just recently had Neptune turn direct. And so these two planetary systems at the moment, I think, play a very important role in understanding the greater context of this new moon in Sagittarius, but also in terms of what is at play when you look at the entirety of the chart and you see what this Mercury retrograde is sort of doing in relation to the other planets that are in the chart at the moment. So like Uranus, for instance, there's Jupiter square Pluto. So there's a lot of moving parts in this chart that I see. And I definitely think that this Neptune direct and this Mercury retrograde speaks volumes to what is currently going on in the background frequency at the moment. So those are the two pieces I also want to quickly address for us as part of, if you hold it in your mind as you're watching this video, that will definitely give you some more clarity around the position that I take with analyzing this chart over here. Okay, so let's do that. Let's take a look at the charts, right? So a new moon in Sagittarius, and the things that I want to be looking at here with this new moon is Pluto squaring the nodes. I want to be taking at Uranus, the Sun, Moon, that is making an aspect. So Uranus, Mars, the Sun, and the Moon are making it quincunx to each other in the chart. Also going to be touching on the Mercury retrograde. Also going to be looking at Neptune squaring the Sun, Moon, and Mars. And finally, we're going to be taking a look at Venus that's in opposition to Jupiter, Jupiter squaring Pluto as well, and talking about how this Venus symbol is very important, right? Venus is deeply connected with the South Node in terms of planetary relationships. Venus is also deeply connected to Taurus in this current astrological configuration. So Venus is a very strong priority to look at, to understand what's kind of happening at the moment, right? So touching base with that and looking at the significance of the Jupiter-Pluto square, which, by the way, in the most recent video that I did, where I was talking about we're not ready, and looking at the kind of global effects of these transits, that seemed to be a pretty popular video amongst people. And I'm really sort of excited to go create a second version of that, where I go a little bit more deeper into some of the topics that I addressed in that video, like the geopolitical conflict that's taking place with Hamas and the Israeli army, as well as how this is affecting the Palestinian people there as well. So some really, really intense stuff that is happening in the collective at the moment. So breaking these down and showing us more about how this is actually playing out in the collective and what it means for us at this point in time. Because that's definitely a big part of the transit at the moment between Pluto and Jupiter, the square. That conflict that's happening there, in my eyes, has a direct correlation to that transit that's taking place. Okay, so that's the roadmap today, and I want to go ahead and take a look at the charts for us. So what you see on the screen at the moment is the current new moon. You notice there 20 degrees of Sagittarius, and you notice that Mars is right next to that, right? This new moon, if you notice my cursor, there it sits 20 degrees with Mars sitting at 13. So from an evolutionary astrology perspective, when you have a new moon and it's on top of a planet, I mean, this is not necessarily EA specifically, but when you have a signature like that where there's a new moon, to me, it signals a very strong, like, hey, by the way, pay attention to this planetary system, right? Pay attention to Mars at the moment. And what's interesting here is that this planet Mars is directly connected to the North Node here in Aries, as well as Chiron, okay? So that Mars energy is directly connected to the North Node there in Chiron. So we have Mars representing new evolutionary development. So, hey, by the way, go in that direction. That's what the North Node says. That's if you expose yourself to those North Node themes, there will be a sort of development of new experiences, right? New situations, new circumstances, new ways of being is probably the tagline that I would say here. So in your life, where are there new emergent patterns coming out of your current relationship configuration? Okay, so if you notice around you, you'll say, here's my relationship to my work, here's my relationship to the world, here's my relationship to my parents or my siblings or family, here's my relationship to my partner, etc. Here's my relationship to myself. So there's multiple relationships that we have to the outside world, and then of course including to ourselves. So this Mars energy right now is putting emphasis on how we are interfacing, how we are interacting with these relationship patterns that we have. And what I'm pointing to here is that if you pay attention to what is present for you, what is salient for you in these relationship dynamics, you may notice that there is maybe a new desire to relate to these relationship patterns in new ways, or at least that it's forming underneath like your sort of outer world and inside of yourself, and you're saying, I wonder if this is relevant for me anymore. I wonder if I really do value this anymore. I wonder if I value that, or I wonder if I still need to keep this pattern in my life present. So you're noticing this, okay? So this new moon points towards the underlying sort of way that you map your relationships and how you perceive them and what you would consider to be valuable, what you would consider to be meaningful, what you would consider to be purposeful, all of the things that allows us to become attached to these relationship patterns. They're going under a deep review, okay? So this review process is then naturally prompting I wonder if I can change something, or something needs to change within me, or I need to interact with it differently because this old way no longer works for me anymore. And you'll be very sort of present with that, this kind of like tension between, that doesn't work for me anymore, and here's what's working, or I need to change this. And so you're kind of like prompted to explore something new. And that's kind of the Pluto square the nodes at the moment that's occurring, as well as the Sun Moon conjunction to this Mars, and that this Mars energy connected to this North Node that's happening here at the moment, right? Okay, so did everybody see that so far? So here's this aspect I'm talking about, here's this new energy, and then if you look over here, Pluto squaring the nodes, Pluto 28 squaring the South and North Node. So the flip-flopping between the old and the new, and then this new moon sitting on top of this Mars saying, okay, kiddo, now we've really got to sort of examine these underlying belief systems that we hold and ask ourselves, how up to date are these belief systems in relation to what I'm experiencing currently in my reality? Okay, so in different ways and different levels, we're all having this this experience for ourselves. So what is emerging and what is no longer sustainable would be kind of the tagline there. Okay. As you can see there, Neptune sitting at 24 degrees, moving direct. In this video, here we see Mercury at 8 degrees, Mercury will retrograde, and it will go all the way back into Sagittarius there. So that's that aspect there, and I'll talk about it at length. So let's take a look at this aspect that is being highlighted here, right? So we've got Venus in Scorpio in a direct opposition to Jupiter, and then we have Venus making an aspect to Neptune, and Venus making an aspect to Mercury. Okay, so this signature that we're staring at and looking at right now, firstly, Venus in opposition to Jupiter. This is what is called a full phase opposition, meaning that Venus has already crossed the 180 degree opposition mark between Jupiter. So Venus is at 9, Jupiter's at 6, so therefore it's already 183 degrees past. And what that represents is a need for us to experience social interaction, or social interaction, and we need to be social, And through social interactions, we'll learn to understand where we stand on and what positions we take internally for ourselves. So this full phase opposition is kind of prompting the environment might give you information about what you are noticing is important to take along with you with this North Node in Aries energy, and what needs to stay behind. And this aspect specifically, in my eyes, speaks to the examination that is going on around your values and your perception and what you consider to be meaningful and how this is working for you. And also at a deeper level, like what's the types of beliefs you use to maintain these relationships? Like a lot of the time, we can maintain a relationship because there's an underlying need to feel safe, but yet that underlying need for safety may prompt a codependency where there is boundaries that are crossed, but you can't sort of like allow yourself the freedom to say yes to saying this boundary is being crossed, because if you do that, it might threaten the underlying security that you need. So what this will represent is an examination of what is causing this underlying belief system to hold the relationship in play. So relationships are about patterns that we tell each other that we are okay and not okay with. And then what happens is if you go further back and you explore what creates those patterns, you'll find pre-existing belief systems that drive those pattern-making experiences, okay? So this energy over here prompts a deep kind of reflection, like, oh, I noticed this experience, let me reflect on it. Do I really want to continue this process? And then you may say no, and you say, okay, what does that mean for me? Does that mean for me that I've got to renegotiate the boundary? Let's say you say, yes, I want to continue the relationship, but you know deep down inside that you're like holding that pattern because of an insecurity or because of an unprocessed emotion, whatever that may be. So you want to kind of then reflect on that and then address that, not try and change the relationship around you, but change yourself so that you come from a new pattern. That's kind of the key here, right? It's like emerging a new pattern out of your perspective. So the sextile to Mercury in here, just as it goes retrograde, prompts a sort of mental state of inversion. It's like looking inward and examining the sort of processes that build your reality, build your belief systems, build the messaging that you tell people you're okay to work with or not. Because there are subtle ways that we tell people in our relationships, whether it be through work relationships, whether it be through actual relationships like adult relationships or relationships to our children. There's always a sort of messaging that we elicit, we put out, saying, yes, this is who I am, this is okay, this is not okay. And this energy over here, to me, represents a sort of examination and analysis of how those relationships are formed, and to kind of get in touch with the dynamicness of that. Relationships are never ever static, right? They're always kind of changing. We're always changing and evolving. So, take that moment to kind of notice what is shaping and reshaping the way that you are interacting with people and with relationships, and see if there are possibilities and potentials to improve the value and quality of your own relationship, but also the relationship that you maybe have to other people, and how you can deeply nourish yourself through a relationship where you offer value and support and interaction. This also may be a time where you can begin to sort of open up certain difficult parts of the relationship and ask yourself, how can we work on those difficult parts? Maybe there's been a set of experiences that is tough and difficult to talk about, right? This is a great opportunity to kind of maybe bring those to the surface in a way that creates progress. And if you need sort of support or tools around to do that, then this would be a great time to also have agency around that. Be like, okay, well, let's kind of reach out to a professional therapist, or maybe you want to have an evolutionary astrology reading with somebody that can do a synthesis, a synastry and composite charts as an example. There's also an opportunity to take action here. And this Mercury retrograde over this period of time points to a potential inward reflection of what these underlying dynamics could be, okay? So there's that. So if we take a look at this aspect here, so here we got the moon, the sun, and Mercury, pardon me, not Mercury, Moon, Sun, and Mars. And just by the way, guys, if this video, if you need time to integrate, always pause it and then, reflect on what I was talking about over there, or kind of process that, see what that means to you, and then continue with the video, so that you don't kind of feel overwhelmed with the amount of information that's coming out at you. You can always kind of take a moment to pause it and to reflect, or come back to it as well, okay? Good way to interact with it. Okay, so here we're looking at Sun, Moon, Mars, as I said, squaring Neptune, and then you've got these trines to the North Node, implying this harmonic possibility to respond to or have agency around old dynamics, so that old dynamics can kind of fade away, Neptune square, and new potential imagined states of possibility, potential healing, integration, these kind of words that all reflect a more healthier way of being able to communicate with one another, that feels balanced, equal, and integrative, right? Valuable. Because that's what relationships are, right? We when we collaborate with each other, we're so much more potent, we're so much more powerful in our capacity to think about problems and challenges that we face in the world, not only in our work lives, but also improving the state of how relationships can feel more nourishing as we process our own human existence. So that kind of trine over there supports this possibility for emerging into a space and saying, hey, this conversation might be difficult. I think it's a good idea to open it up. Maybe let's create a space where we can talk about some of the things that have been challenging for us in the past. And let's see if we can find some form of collaboration, some form of equal footing, where both of us kind of benefit from having our needs met, or expressing our needs, or talking about maybe some events that have been difficult in the past, as an example, right? That's what I'm thinking about here. Okay, now this little aspect here between Uranus and these energies here speaks to the sudden and unexpected eruption that can take place when we experience our ideologies and our perspectives and our points of views challenged. Okay, so let me break this down. This aspect, this sort of inconjunct aspect between Taurus and Sagittarius on the sort of mundane consensus level is the reason why, when we develop our ideologies and our perspectives and our points of views of the world, it's difficult for us to have them sort of interacted with without there having oftentimes a kind of defensive position, a defensive posturing. It's like, oh, I feel, maybe somebody says to you, well, how do we know that's true? And that can oftentimes kind of challenge our deep insecurities around how we form these ideas, especially when our identity is deeply entrenched in an ideology or in a perspective or a point of view. The inconjunct suggests and points to how, when we are experiencing somebody else kind of ask us questions to deepen their understanding of a point of view or a perspective, or the other way around, we can feel that happening at a personal level. It threatens our sort of self-preservation instincts. So, as I said again, one of the deep reasons why religion and religious ideologies can be so powerful is because it gives people a capacity to connect with their self-agency and their ability to kind of orientate in the world in a very kind of practical way. And it gives meaning to things that can oftentimes feel very absent. Human beings are meaning-making cognitive beings. And so it's important for us to have a landscape of perception that meets this need for meaning. But the other side of it is that it also is what creates the breeding ground for ideological conflicts and ideological sort of fanatical belief systems that, when in extreme situations, can often be incredibly detrimental. Because again, if you sort of meet somebody that is deeply entrenched in their ideology and identifies so profoundly with the belief, their self-identity is baked in, it's embedded into the belief. And so if you threaten the belief, you also threaten indirectly their sense of identity and self. And this aspect between Taurus and Sagittarius speaks to where we can go through some experiences that might challenge that underlying self-preservation instinct. And so notice yourself kind of, when you're kind of sharing your ideas about something, ask yourself the question, how do I understand it myself? Where is my identity deeply entrenched in the position I'm taking, as an example? Like, these are the self-reflective perspectives and points of views that we can hold, not only for ourselves to create more objectivity around how we see things, but it can also help us acknowledge some of the blind spots that we may have in our own thinking and give the opportunity to acknowledge them, right? Every single one of us, including me, will have cognitive biases, right? It's just the function of the brain. And cognitive biases are deeply associated with Sagittarius and Taurus, especially that inconjunct, simply because of the fact that we only see a certain perspective of something. That's why we require social interaction to challenge our ideas and points of views and perspectives, so that we can kind of broaden and deepen our capacity for understanding what we experience in the phenomena of reality. So that's an aspect over here that's going to be sort of interesting to observe, especially, for some of you that are watching this video. What I encourage you to do with this transit is allow yourself some reflection time around how do you come to form your belief systems, what may be informing the part of you that associates yourself with the belief system. As an example, like for me, it's very obvious that when I was growing up, astrology became a tool for me to not only connect with people, but it also gave me a sense of creating error reduction when the world was so volatile, right? When the world was so volatile and sort of confusing, it allowed me to kind of reduce the capacity for chaos in my perspective, because it helped me find meaning in things that often were absent. And so it drives a deep association for why that I believe the things that I do, or kind of follow the perspective I have, is because it gives me a sense of relief internally around how I perceive the world works and so on. But it doesn't mean that that is the absolute truth. It means that that's what I use to in a sense, orientate. I sense that many of you that have probably come to this channel and watch other astrology channels arrived at this place and at this point because the world, in terms of your perception and cognitive experiences, was sort of wildly being challenged by the frames that you already had installed growing up. And so that kind of conflict between, shit, what's happening in my life? I need answers to questions that are beyond the scope of what has been provided to me, led you to inquire into something like this. And so, that's one of the reasons why the world that we live in today has a rise in things like ideological association, or the natural kind of leaning towards using astrology as a tool to make sense of things, is because the level of volatility that exists in the world is incredibly profound. And we need to be able to sort of mitigate that intense volatility by reducing it to something that feels so much more sort of in control, that we have control over things. I mean, it's just how our cognition works. So that's something that's really potent with this over here. And again, this is going to sort of interact in the realms of how relationships work, interact in terms of, what I might be experiencing and what I go through and what I see and feel. Oftentimes I can feel very disconnected from the other person's experience and other person's world because I don't know what it's like to be in that, right? This is kind of what these transits are about. It's kind of like almost dropping into a state of dialogue where you drop the assumption of understanding what it is and sort of asking the question, okay, so what does that mean for you? Or how do you experience that? And so when you drop into a deeper way of relating to another person's world, you find that there is a deeper human connection that manifests from that. And you will often find that these types of ways of connection and communication lead to greater experiences of sort of agape love, right? The capacity to really bond with and feel a sense of belonging with humankind. But although the transits that you're seeing on the screen right now absolutely point to the sort of shattering of that idealistic position that I take, which is to say that the world is not like that. Human beings do suffer from intense amounts of trauma and pain and suffering, and the gap between somebody saying, yes, I forgive you for these things, that have happened, these trespasses or these violations, can be too big, and so that will render a sort of polarity or polarization and faction-based kind of thinking where there is just a loss of that intimate connection. I think that's one of the biggest struggles that we face collectively at the moment in time, is the fracturing that exists within our emotional frameworks and the capacity to see human beings as human beings. That's a tough trajectory, and I would feel foolish to think that that is something that is achievable. I used to believe that. It was something that drove me deeply to do this work, was the belief that, if I could hold a flame or a message to say, hey, by the way, this is possible, that it would. Sort of the early days of Raising Vibrations. But I've come to accept, not only in my own personal processing, that may not necessarily be, it is not the truth, but it doesn't mean that message can't be promoted, right? And that's kind of the groundedness that I feel is anchored within myself at the moment. Okay. So, last transit of the screen that I want to put across over here. This is the Sun Moon, Sagittarius squaring Neptune, and then you've got the South Node in conjuncting Neptune here. Again, this transit, this series of configurations speaks to the way that the patterns of previous relationship building, the way that we've related to ourselves in the past, maybe how things have, the beliefs that we hold about experiences of the past, we're needing them to be challenged, right? We're needing to challenge and confront some of these pre-existing ideas about how things work for us, and ask ourselves the question, are there ways of thinking about these beliefs that have evolved, or what is currently in our world right now versus, say, what installed the belief system a long time ago. So there's always that conflict between, or that kind of space between the emergent new capacity for breaking out of patterns of thinking, and then still holding on to these previous existing belief systems that feel very outdated and oftentimes probably really restrictive in you, because you don't feel that there's a solution to solve, and so it kind of feels stuck at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that for you guys. I know that there's a lot to process over here. Of course, thank you very much for listening. I want to quickly let people know, those of you that are very serious about taking your astrological studies and stepping into the world of having this run as a professional work, I am accepting some applications for personal mentorship with me, okay? So I'm going to leave a link in the description below. I'd like to talk to you about where your current situation is and if there's an opportunity to work with you. So this is for those that have been studying, that believe that there's a calling, there's a vocation, and you want to be sort of mentored in being able to take your astrological studies and then put it into the world. Maybe you can even start becoming a professional astrologer in terms of charging for your readings, being more confident. You've got ideas, you want to create videos, etc. But you need that kind of stepping over that bridge that allows you to get to that more setup orientated, more professional way of doing things. And that's what I want to help you with. So for those of you that are ready to do that, I am accepting some applications. I'll leave a link in the description. Just reach out to me, fill out the form. Let's have a call, and let's see if I can actually help you with that, okay? All right, everybody, thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.